First of all, Christian, I'm thrilled to have you here. Thank you for joining.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So I'm going to take you way back because I was actually in the Verve group when you had your first solo recording, Getting to It,
Mm.
produced by a mutual friend, Richard Seidel. And in fact, I'll tell you another story later about my first interaction with Richard Seidel. But one of the things that was happening back then that you were probably unaware of, you were too busy gigging and just trying to, do your thing, is you were the talk of the town. I mean, when I was at Verve, I was actually wearing two hats. I not only ran a label in the Verve group, but I was still the publisher of Jazziz. And I was hearing about it from our critics, like Howard Reich was telling us how much this new kid, Christian McBride, he's so great. You were the buzz of the 26th floor on Worldwide Plaza, which is where Verve used to live. And even our old friend Tommy LaPuma, he was always singing your praises, always saying Christian, Christian, Christian. And again, you were everywhere. Those days for me sound like and feel like a lifetime ago. How does it feel for you?
Well, we miss our dear friend Tommy a lot.
Oh yeah.
But I recently connected with Richard in San Francisco just a few months ago when I did a residency at SF Jazz. But I think I'm still working as much as I was 30 years ago.
I think so.
Still managing to do a lot of projects, and now, the it's changed in that I'm no longer the young cat getting the gigs. I'm a slightly older cat giving out the gigs now. So it's now my turn to bring up the younger generation.
Yes, and we're going to talk about education in a minute. Speaking of our beloved Tommy, I think the last time I saw you, I was at a restaurant, a steakhouse. It's this old kind of mid-century supper club in DC called the Prime Rib, and
were we with Diana and Hugh Masekela?
Absolutely. In fact, what
Yep.
happened was there was a pianist and a bass player. It's kind of like a supper club.
Yes.
And these guys were pretty good. And they came up to me and they said, "Do you know who's in the next room?" And I said, "As a matter of fact, I don't." And they said, "Well, it's Diana Krall and Christian McBride." And I said, "Wow." So I head over to the next room. You were in a private room. And there you were with Diana and Tommy and Hugh. Yeah. And I kept bumping into you during that. I think that was the weekend of Jazz at the White House.
That's correct. Right.
Yeah. And so after running into you a bunch of times before, during, and after the show, we were walking out of the White House. And I think Aretha was there and Helen Mirren was there, actress. And you looked at me and you said, "I think this is the last time we're going to be invited here." and
I was right.
and you were right. And so I remember that night. But what was interesting too is a little bit of foreshadowing there. If you remember, Helen Mirren introduced Sting for that performance.
Yes.
Which obviously we'll talk about Sting on your new project. But what's interesting is that when I thought I wouldn't see you again for a while, Jamie Cullum and Pat Metheny, we all got together at the St. Regis Hotel. I don't know if you remember that. You were with, it was Jamie and his wife and Pat and his wife and you and your wife, me and my wife. And we closed the place talking about essentially jazz life and anything else that came to our mind. And they finally kicked us out after like 3.
Right.
So it's been a long time. I haven't seen you since, but I've certainly been listening to you since then. And I've enjoyed it so much. So the first question I wanted to ask you about your career is, most people know, certainly jazz people know, that you've you've played with some of the most celebrated jazz artists in the world: Herbie, Pat, Chick, and pop icons Paul McCartney, James Brown. How do you, when you get involved in a project, um, infuse your personality and then realize that this is not my project? So I have to be the best Christian McBride, but they may want something from me that's maybe a little different. And is that the approach to that? How do you navigate that?
I like to think I've never had that problem. My role as a bassist is not that much different than being uh, I have a service role. I have a service position. I'm like an HVAC repair guy. I'm a refrigeration expert. You know, I'm not going into a project to force my personality on someone. My personality is there already simply by me just being present. So I've never had an issue of trying to figure out how to, kind of put my personality in it. I'm there to serve the music. The music calls me and says, "Hey, we need a bass player to do blank." And then whatever that blank is, that's what I do.
Wow. So uh, to bring up Tommy again, because we love him so much, everyone loves Tommy. Love Tommy, and he would call. We would have conversations when he was doing the album with McCartney, and he'd say, I know I'm dealing with probably one of the greatest artists of all time, and he's asking me what we should do. And I don't feel really comfortable with that because it's Paul McCartney asking me this. And you were in those sessions. What was that like?
Well, for starters, I was shocked that Sir Paul was even there in person. I just assumed that somebody as famous as him, we would just be laying down tracks and, that we'd send him to England or wherever he was and he'd record his vocals. So when we got to the studio, and I remember specifically, there was a major, major snowstorm on the way to New York the day we tracked. And there was talk that the session might get canceled or postponed rather, because there's going to be so much snow. But we decided that we'd do it anyway. And when we got there was someone there and said, like, no cameras, no autographs. And I thought, what are they talking about? Why would we have cameras and autographs at a tracking session? And then someone said, "Oh, Paul is actually coming. He's on his way." I went, "What? He's coming?" And so there he was. He showed up, and nicest guy in the whole world. I mean, just he was just one of the cats. He showed up, and he's like, "Okay, hey, what are we doing? What's first? How you guys want to do it?" I mean, just the easiest going, most wonderful, positive personality you could ever imagine.
Wow. Well, that must have been a great experience. I'm a huge McCartney fan.
Yeah.
Um, I was going to ask as part of that question. I've read some interviews and watched some interviews with you, and you talk about the importance of listening. And since I'm not a player, I'm a serious listener. When I listen to your albums or Miles or Matheny or whoever, I'm listening so carefully that sometimes it almost becomes work. Uh,
Mhm.
tell me about how being a good listener has molded your career.
Well, again, I think it's part of being not just a good musician, but I think being a fairly, empathetic, sympathetic person. You got to be able to listen to what's going on. How you listen depends on the answer that you give. And if you listen more and if you assess the terrain by listening, most of your choices are going to be right. Now the good part about jazz is that uh, every once in a blue moon, you might make a wrong guess, but that's okay. There's ways of recovering from that. You know, It's not like many pop gigs, not all pop gigs, but many pop gigs where the goal is to memorize the script. Success means that you duplicate the same show every night. Whereas in jazz, almost the exact opposite means success. Play the same songs, but play them different ways every night.
Yeah. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. So let's move to your latest project. To say it's ambitious is an understatement. I actually, in the intro that I did before we got on, I said, this is not simply a big band project. This is a big project, and you can hear it. And you know, the, over the years, you've been part of some big projects, whether it was Inside Straight, Christian McBride Big Band. When you started shaping your latest album, Without Further Ado, Volume 1, was there a singular idea that you anchored to say, this is what I want this album to be?
This new album is quite it stems from quite a pragmatic thought. Starting in 2012, I became artistic advisor for jazz programming at New Jersey Performing Arts Center, NJPAC. And so since then, my big band has been the house band for our annual gala. And we've invited some really, really great vocalists to come and sing at the gala. We've had everybody from Al Jarreau, rest in peace, to Diane Reeves, to uh, Cecile McLaurin-Salvant, Fantasia, Philip Bailey, Andra Day, Liz Wright. I mean, all kinds of great singers, Kenny Lattimore. And so after all of these years of writing these big band charts for these singers, I realized I had a huge stack of music that had only been played once, and that was for the annual gala. And I thought, well, I'd hate to have to write all of these big band arrangements every single year just for one night and then no one ever hears them again. So I looked at this pile and I said, let's record these. This will be the next record.
Wow.
So it inadvertently, NJ Pack commissioned me to make my new album.
Wow. So how did you decide which tunes were going to maintain the originality of the tune and which ones you were going to take in a different direction?
Oh, it depended on whoever the vocalist was for that particular performance. Some vocalists like to keep it simple. Other vocalists say stretch as much as you want, you know. But you realize that if you don't have a lot of rehearsal time, you're not going to stretch all that much. But
Mhm.
somebody like Diane Reeves is always so wide open to anything and everything, mostly because she can do anything and everything. So
Right.
she had an arrangement of Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow, which I believe was originally arranged by Russell Ferrante. And she gave me that arrangement and she said, turn this into a big band arrangement. So that's what I did. Um, and somebody like Cecile McLaurin-Salvant, we did All Through the Night. Now that song is usually done as a ballad.
Mhm.
And she said, I want to do that song as an up-tempo burner. I said, really? Okay. She said, I don't know how I want it, but I know I wanted a fast up-tempo swing. So that was my only directive, and that's what I did. And so it was fun to kind of go through this pile and pick ones that I thought would be good for the new album.
Well, that's great. So, you know, and Diane Reeves, I can't tell you how much I love her and how many artists I've talked to who said, yeah, she's like my favorite singer.
Oh,
And,
she's
and
she's she's the
she's,
best.
she's yeah. Murder by Numbers. I guess you can call this a partial partial police reunion,
That's right. Two
and
thirds.
2/3, and you nailed it because you gave it life, and it's kind of symbolic. It's 2/3 of the police reliving. Um, in addition to the musical conversation that you're clearly having between the horns, the guitar, and the bass, what were the music conversations taking place in the studio with Sting and Andy?
Well, Andy wasn't there. We sent him the track to England,
Okay.
and he put his part down. But uh, I've been working with Sting long enough that he trusted me, and he knew that I would give him an arrangement that would suit him. And when he said, when we decided that we were going to do Murder by Numbers, I assumed that, since the original version is, what, 42 years old, that most likely he doesn't sing it in the same key. So I did a deep dive and I found a recording of the Police doing Murder by Numbers on their reunion tour from 2008. And so my big band arrangement was based on that bootleg version I heard from them
Wow.
on the reunion tour.
Wow. No, I'll have to check that out. I
I
hadn't heard
I
that.
I never told Sting that.
Well, now he knows, right?
Right, right.
Um, volume one implies a journey.
Yes.
So, what is the thread that may take you to volume two?
Well, I'll give you a little teaser and say that
Okay.
volume 2 is done also. It's just patiently sitting in the refrigerator, waiting to be served. So, like I said, there's more than 10 years of big band charts that I've written for all of these singers. So, now, volume 1, at the time of this interview, volume 1 is still not officially released yet. But by the time volume 2 is released, um, I will have, I hope that people will have enjoyed volume 1 a whole lot.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. The kind of a seminal moment. There's some things about this album that I've heard in your music before, and some things that are there's some nuances. Again, I listen. It's kind of what I love to do. Was there a moment as a band leader in this album, in any particular track, where you say, "This is exactly where I want to be. This is me"?
No, I think I can find a a place of comfort and yeah, a place of comfort in almost any style of music I play. I think that's the goal. You want to find some place where you can feel comfortable, where you feel like you're contributing something, but also learning something or, receiving something. So I don't think I've ever had a problem finding a place to find my space.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, for sure. Well, in finding your space, I've seen you play in small clubs, and I've known you played in front of audiences 20,000 or more. Doing that, knowing that obviously there's the intimate setting in the club, there's this huge stage and audience in a concert. Um, how do you adjust that energy, or do you just do what you do, whether it's 200 people or 100 times that?
Well, obviously, you have to make certain adjustments on the fly. It's hard to say what they are. Uh, but, for example, they used to hold the Tokyo Jazz Festival in a huge stadium. The first time I played, was it my first gig ever in Tokyo? I think the first time I ever played in Tokyo was was at the Tokyo Dome, which I think was
Mm.
91,000 seats. You know, so there's not really any such thing as subtlety when you're playing in a 91,000 seat stadium. Uh, what you do is, it's not about playing for the first few rows because the first few rows are like, uh, 100 feet away. you know,
Yeah, yeah,
um, but you try to lie, you try to get some good sound stage. You try not to. I mean, I don't really like monitors. They're just they tend to be more of a burden than a help, just for me personally.
Mhm.
So I like to use my ears. I generally tend to have the best seat in the house because I'm between the bass and the drums. So
Mhm.
as long as I'm locked in with the drummer, I kind of don't really care what else is happening.
Okay, fair enough. Well, you were mentioning before, and I promised I'd get to this. You know, beyond performance and recordings, you've been deeply involved in jazz education. I know that you and Melissa.
Yeah.
Uh, what trends are you seeing in your academic side that you're most energized about, and what maybe some new musicians that no one that we haven't heard of, the public, that you're excited about? Tell me about that.
I'm not even sure I'm as excited about the younger musicians that are coming up because the rate and the speed at which they're learning now due to certain apps, due to the internet, due to the fact that there are a lot of places in the country, or at least a few places in the country, that have organizations similar to Jazz House Kids. If you want to go to college, you got a number of schools that you can go to that have jazz training. But what I find that's probably the biggest challenge is how social media affects the younger generation, and frankly the older generation for that matter, because it used to be you had a lot of veterans out there who were touring and doing the circuit, and you took these young musicians on the road with you, and you gave them an opportunity to earn their stripes on the road. You put them in front of an
Mhm.
audience playing the band leaders music. They in turn get a following of their own, and then the cycle keeps going. Then they become band leaders and they do the same thing. But I think that with a lot of musicians not really wanting to do that road grind the way they used to, a lot of those teachers who used to be on the road leading bands, they are now the teachers at these schools. And so
Mhm.
when you get out of high school, you go to a college, instead of looking forward to going on the road with someone you admired on a recording, you now get to study with them privately at a school. So what happens when you graduate from school? Now they're kind of out in the wilderness going, now what do I do? Right?
Mm.
Maybe I'll just make a bunch of YouTube videos. I'll make a bunch of TikTok videos, and hopefully somebody will discover me, you know. And so you find these extremely well-trained musicians now. So what happens is you get these incredibly trained young musicians. I mean, like they learn this information and certain technique at the speed of light, but instead of looking for a gig, they're now looking to get like, you know, TikTok hits, Instagram
Mhm.
hits. And so you're now learning how you have to manage to that as opposed to them preparing for a gig.
Well, so knowing this, do you think that's going to have a positive effect on the future of music or a deleterious effect?
I I don't know. I mean, I think time will tell. I know that just personally speaking, um I tried teaching. I tried teaching in the university system for 4 years, and I tried teaching privately, and I realized that that's just not where my strength is. My strength is being on the road, writing music, or having musicians that play with me write music, and then we develop that on the road in front of people. That's I think that's where my strength lies.
Well, that's a good transition to let's talk about Brother Mister Productions.
Ah,
Uh, you're now a record label exec, and under your own label uh, through Mac Avenue. What was the inspiration to have your own label?
Mac Avenue had asked me to produce a number of sessions for them. I produced an album for Sean Jones. I produced Warren Wolf's Mac Avenue debut. I produced Christian Sands' his Mac Avenue debut. And so I started to do sort of all of this in-house work, and I produced a CD for this brilliant singer named Antoinette Henry, who's actually on my big band,
Yeah.
upcoming big band recording. And so I started all of a sudden producing all of these records, and my manager at the time, we kind of looked at each other, was like, "Huh, I think we have we might have to go to Mac Avenue about a label, you know." Because I had, like I said, I'd been doing some in-house stuff for them anyway, and they had offered me an A&R gig. That's not something a lot of people know.
Wow.
Um,
Did
but
not.
then the pandemic came along and just wiped everything out, and that kind of killed that. But I think my long time relationship with Mac Avenue, it just kind of, Brother Mister sort of organically came up. So I brought Jennifer Hartswick to the label, the great trumpet player and singer from the Trey Anastasio band. Dan Wilson, who is one of the great, great young guitar players on the
I
scene.
love Dan Wilson.
Oh, Dan's a monster. And
Oh,
East Axis, a great group led by Scott Robinson and Matthew Shipp, the bassist Kevin Ray, and the drummer Gerald Cleaver. Um, and yeah, those were my first three signings.
and what's interesting about those three, again, because I listen, is none of them are alike. I
Right.
mean, you couldn't have picked three. Matthew Shipp, he can definitely be out there and eclectic. Jennifer, and then Dan's playing on guitar. They're three very different artists. So it almost seems like he purposely said, I don't want to do a bunch of the same. I want to be very diverse."
Yeah, I feel like there's so much good music out there. Not all the music that has the most integrity is not always just some straight up, straight ahead acoustic jazz. There's a lot of good music out there, and I'm trying to stick my toe in as much as I possibly can.
No, you're doing it, and we're enjoying it a lot.
Thank you.
You know, your some of the more recent albums, Christian McBride's New John and For Jimmy, Wes and Oliver have got a lot of praise, a lot of incredible feedback on those, critically acclaimed. How do you push forward? What is the secret sauce that allows you, especially I noted on those albums, to balance tradition and say, "But let's try it this way"?
I don't know if it's ever been that much of a battle. I really, really enjoy playing in the pocket, whether that's 4/4 swing, whether that's funk, whether that's some sort of uh, African or Caribbean or Latin groove, whatever you want to call it. I like being in a pocket, and most of the time, pockets tend to be traditional. I mean,
Mhm.
at this point, uh, funk is almost as old as straight ahead jazz. So, uh, if a jazz musician decides to play funk, we got to stop saying that that's stretching out. In 2025, that's hardly a stretch because I think most jazz musicians of a certain generation probably learn how to play funk before they learn how to play jazz. Um, so I never really think about whether if it's traditional versus trying to stretch. I'm kind of for whatever works. I mean, I think if the music is not touching you, if it's not moving you, then you shape it to whatever way you need to shape it to make it work for you.
Wow. So, knowing what I know about you, if I could peek into your calendar over the next year, what projects, and aside from Volume Two, which we now you let the cat out of the bag, whether it's as band leader, sideman, label head, educator, what projects are you most excited about?
I'm excited about the release of my big band record, but I'm also excited about the release of Lettuce's new album, which is coming out in
Mm.
October. She's doing a Dinah Washington tribute album called For Dinah, and I produced and arranged it. And I think Lettuce is about to, she did such a great job with her Nina Simone tribute project. I think this Dinah Washington project is going to make just as much noise. And I'm excited about that. That's going to be released in October. I also produce the new album for Joan Osborne. She's doing Relish Reimagined. So this
Wow.
is the 30-year anniversary of her big, huge smash album, Relish. And so we got together at last year's Newport Jazz Festival just to hang. And she liked being at the festival. And she said, I want to talk to you about working together on the project. And she said, look, I'm older and wiser now, and I would like to revisit those songs with a more mature, acoustic, jazzier eye. And she asked me if I would produce it. And so I'm excited about those two, Lettuce and Joan Osborne.
Wow. I'm looking forward to those. Well, Christian, huge thanks to you. Thanks for your time, your wisdom, your constant groove.
Hey, man,
Everyone,
thanks
be
for
sure.
having me.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone, be sure to subscribe to our podcast music service and stay tuned to us to know everything that's going on in great music. See you next time.